Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt. My name is Bodie, and I am your host, and this is a Tuesday episode because on Friday, we are going to talk all about Tesla's Q3 2022 earnings call. So let's get into it, shall we? I asked you folks, what do you think the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration should call over-the-air updates? Instead of recalls, we need to call them something different. Mark from the UK, he's a Patreon supporter. Hi, Mark. He suggested calling them mandatory updates. So here's his email. My suggestion phrase, instead of recall, where the OTA fix is the solution, my understanding of a recall is that they are logged, so a new buyer can check which recalls are needed and which have been carried out. So mandatory update is my suggestion. To which I say, this is a great point. I hadn't considered that they needed a way to log those recalls and whether or not they had actually been fulfilled or not. So that great job, Mark. I learned something. I'm actually embarrassed that I did not think of that. If you have a suggestion on what the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration should call these updates, these over-the-air updates that are now currently called recalls and get a lot of news because, 1.5 million vehicles are being recalled, and in reality, it's just a simple software update. If you have an idea of what they should be called, email me. It's Bodie, BODIE at 918digital.com. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our news this week. Lincoln is asking their dealers to invest up to $900,000 on chargers, equipment, and infrastructure if they want to sell Lincoln EVs. This is really similar to what Ford is doing with their electric vehicles and their dealers. Like they're saying, if you want to sell electric vehicles, then you got to invest in this infrastructure. And this is no surprise since Ford actually owns Lincoln. The part of this that doesn't make sense to me, because it makes sense for Ford to do this because they're currently selling electric vehicles, right? Even though it's only 2. But it doesn't make sense that Lincoln's doing this right now because Lincoln doesn't actually sell an electric vehicle, and they may not sell an EV for years, or at least one that we know about. It's always possible that Lincoln will come out with an electric vehicle based on, the F-150 Lightning or the Mach-E, right? That's always possible that they can announce that next week and it could be out, in 2023. But as of right now, we really don't have anything concrete that Lincoln is working on. Now, I'm sure they're working on something, but to require the dealers to make this big investment without having an electric vehicle, within, let's just say a year, for sure, we're going to have an electric vehicle in 2023 from Lincoln, seems a little premature. Dealers need to make a decision by December 15th, 2022. So it's not that far away that they need to be like yay or nay that they're in. And just like Ford, there's enrollment periods. So if you don't enroll on December 15th, you have to wait until 2026, the end of 2026, to enroll again, and you won't be able to start selling EVs until 2027. So if, let's just say, Lincoln comes out with the greatest EV ever during that time period, you're locked out of selling that vehicle. Now, the thing that I don't know is that Ford kind of has these tiered systems. They have 2 tiers. You pay a certain amount of money and you get a certain amount of EVs, right? It's a fairly low investment. Versus if you make the bigger investment, you basically get as many EVs as you can sell. It doesn't sound like Lincoln is doing that. And it's probably not appropriate. Like if I was a Lincoln dealer, I don't think I would invest the $900,000 at this time. Like Lincoln wants 2 DC fast chargers. Why would you want 2 DC fast chargers if at the moment you're not selling an EV and it's not on the horizon? It just seems like, I understand that they're prepping for something, but it seems unnecessary to be giving them this short of a deadline. Now, in a few weeks, I fully recognize in a few weeks that we might actually get news that makes all of this make sense, right? But right now, to me, it doesn't make sense financially to spend almost $1 million. And in reality, you're not going to recoup your money until Ford actually, releases an EV. Like, I don't know that it's going to be, I don't know, it makes financial sense, but I'm not a business person. The 2023 GMC Sierra Denali electric truck will be revealed on October 20th. Now, this is going to be a busy day because October 20th is when Tesla is going to do their earnings call. I'll be putting together the earnings call, but if it makes sense, I'll add portions to next Tuesday's episode highlighting the GMC Denali electric truck. That's a mouthful. But I'm looking forward to seeing this. Speaking of GM, did you know that the GM EV1 was leased and delivered through Saturn dealership? Back in the 90s, Saturn was supposed to be the new way to buy a car. And it's a GM property, or it was, because Saturn's not around anymore. And I actually bought a Saturn. That was my first brand new car that I bought. It was the sedan. I can't remember exactly what it was called. But they take you into like this little showroom area where your car is, and they all clap for you. I don't like this kind of attention, by the way. But part of the fun was them to make a big deal out of buying a car. Well, I read this article on carswithcords.net, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that article because you should go and read it. There's actually a little bit more to that article than what I gave you, but that was just a fun little factoid that I thought people might find interesting. By the way, hi, Patrick. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Honda. We all know Honda is very far behind when it comes to EVs. To catch up, Honda has partnered with GM, and they're going to use their Ultium EV platform. Like the new Honda Prologue EV is actually built on the Ultium platform, and it's probably going to be very similar to the Chevy Blazer EV, if I had to guess. Well, Honda is also working on a new EV brand with Sony. Right now, it's called Sony Honda Mobility, which probably not the final name for that brand because it's terrible. As it stands right now, their first luxury-oriented EV won't be out until 2026, and it's likely going to be a direct-to-consumer sales situation, much like Rivian does and Tesla does. But Honda dealers are seeing the writing on the wall, and they're arguing that they play a valuable role in the sales process. And as a general rule for companies like Ford, Chevy, Volvo, Dodge, or Stellantis, for those companies who already have dealerships in place, I do think dealers will have a fairly valuable role in the sales process, but I don't think it's going to be the same. Like, I don't think dealers are going to be playing the same role as they do today. If you look at Ford, what Ford has done with their Model E brand, dealers can price vehicles at whatever price they want, at whatever price they think is fair. Like if they want to take an F-150 Lightning Limited, which is like $75,000, or the Lariat, not Limited, which is like $75,000, and they want to add another $75,000 to that, they're welcome to do it. But customers can go to Ford's website and look at all of the prices from Ford dealers for that particular vehicle, all of the Ford dealers in their area, and they can pick a price that works for them. Like, not many people are going to go out and spend, $150,000 on a $75,000 truck when there's a Ford dealership, 10 miles away or 10 miles further down the road that will sell it to you for $75,000. It just doesn't make sense. So I think that dealerships are going to be forced into a different role. The next 10 or 12 years are going to be very interesting. And I'm hoping to be still doing this podcast in that time, and we'll chronicle it here. And as a side note, this has nothing to do with auto dealerships. This has to do with Sony Honda Mobility. They want to offer software subscription services for their cars. Now, I let out a string of curse words that involved an F and a U when it comes to this. Like, when I buy a car, and I don't know about you, but when I buy a car, I do not want to be hit with a bunch of software subscriptions so that I can have heated seats. Like, I'm not paying $12 a month or whatever you think you want to charge me so that I can have heated and ventilated seats when it's already built into the car. Like, this kind of mentality is maddening to me. It's 100% greed. But before I get too animated about this and say something stupid, we'll have to wait and see what they're really thinking about when it comes to subscription services. But as a general rule, this is a terrible idea. We'll know more when they launch the vehicle in 2026 and they have plenty of time to change their mind, but it's unlikely that they will. Anyway, this week was the Paris Motor Show, and Jeep revealed the Avenger EV. There's a reason that they revealed the Avenger EV at the Paris Motor Show, and that's because it's not coming to North America. It's going to stay in Europe. So the specs of this car is that, first of all, it's small. It's the smallest Jeep model that they make. It's 6.3 inches shorter than the Jeep Renegade, which is the smallest Jeep vehicle that they sell here in the United States. It'll feature a 10.25-inch touchscreen infotainment system. It's got driver assist systems, although they didn't really go into what those were, like lane keep assist and that kind of thing, but they didn't go into great detail. It's all the things that you would normally think. Front-wheel drive, 154 horsepower, 100 kilowatt max charge rate, which is a little low, 54 kilowatt hour battery pack, 249 mile range, and it will charge between 20 and 80% in 24 minutes. That's not terrible. Overall, I'm excited to see what people think of the Avenger in Europe. If you listen to the show and you buy one and you want to give me your opinion, it's Bodie, BODIE at 918digital.com. Hyundai will be breaking ground on their new EV factory, and they're going to call it the Metaplant. They're actually breaking ground on the Metaplant in Savannah, Georgia on October 25th. I don't know why they call it the Metaplant. All I can think of is Facebook's Meta, and then just a plant, like a regular old plant that you have at your desk. Anyway, this is going to be a $5.5 billion factory, and it will have an annual capacity of 300,000 vehicles once they get up and running. Hyundai has also pledged a total of $10 billion investment into the U.S. mobility market. I don't know what they're going to do with that other $4.5 billion, but, cool. This plant is in response to the Inflation Reduction Act, which we've talked about recently. Last week, I mentioned that European officials were not happy with the tax credit requirements found in the Inflation Reduction Act, and they would be meeting with U.S. officials. Well, it turns out South Korea and Hyundai are also not pleased with the tax credit requirements, and they also plan to meet with U.S. officials. Cars should start rolling off the line at this plant, at the Metaplant, in 2026. All right, we have some follow-up here on Nikola Motors founder and former CEO Trevor Milton. He has been found guilty on 3 counts of criminal fraud, 2 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of securities fraud. I am not a lawyer, so I will not try to explain those counts to you, because as I'm learning, as I dig into more of this stuff, I do not understand. Like, what you think it means probably isn't what it means as a layman. That's what I'm saying. But Milton was actually facing 4 counts of fraud. He was found guilty of 3. The maximum sentence on this is 20 to 25 years in prison for the top charge. Milton still claims he did nothing wrong, and that when he was making these statements, he was talking about their business plan. Maybe. Evidently, that's not what the jury thought. And there we go. We have 3 counts of fraud. Anyway, Milton resigned in 2020. Nikola has turned around somewhat since that time. They had to pay like $125 million, and then they're just kind of moving on without him. But he is currently the largest shareholder in the company. So this guy can be found guilty. He can go to jail. He can lose some money, but he's still going to have a ton of money when he gets out. If you're new to the show and you don't know what's going on with this case, I put links in the show notes. You can also just Google Trevor Milton and Nikola and fraud, and you'll find everything there. It's a pretty interesting story. Well, that is it for our EV news. Let's jump into our Tesla news. A report from Handelsblatt, a German media outlet, has suggested that Tesla is reevaluating its plan to build 4680 cells in Germany. And really, reevaluating probably isn't the right term. They're putting a pause on their German battery cell plant. And the reason why is it sounds like, now this is all rumor, so I just have to say this. We don't know if this is true or not, but it sounds like Tesla is actually moving equipment from their plant in Berlin to their plant in Texas. And the only equipment that they're going to leave in Germany is the electrode production equipment, and everything else is going to Giga, Texas. So the original article, the source article, is Handelsblatt, right? That article is in German. I tried to find a way to convert that German to English so that I could read it, but it's also behind a paywall. So I'm relying on Electric for translation. So let's go ahead and get into what the article had to say. The fact that Tesla will not start full battery cell production in its German plant for the time being apparently has other reasons than lower energy costs and new tax incentives in the United States worth billions. Several sources close to the electric car manufacturer report a significant delay in crucial but highly complex production technique. Now, Tesla has been very open when it comes to the problems they're having scaling up the 4680 battery cells. Like they always say they're just right there. They just have one more problem to solve. Well, that one more problem either is continuing or they're finding more problems. The article went on to say this. Tesla boss Elon Musk wants to continue to build a battery cell plant in Brandenburg in the long term. But before that, the electric car manufacturer has to get the so-called dry coating of the electrodes under control. A total of 5 experts, 2 of whom are close to Tesla, report the test systems with the technology are currently running quite successfully, but that implementation in a large series is lacking. So basically they can't hit scale. And Elon has mentioned this, the dry coating of the electrode. That's been mentioned several times. So you may be asking yourself, what's the reason to bring all of this battery equipment, manufacturing equipment here to the United States? Well, the Cybertruck is on the horizon, and it would make sense that Tesla would want the ability to build as many of these 4680 cells as possible, especially when you consider they're having a hard time building them at scale. They're probably going to need more lines to actually make this happen. Plus, the Model Ys that are built at Giga Texas are supposed to also have 4680 cells in them. Not all of them do, but they're supposed to. I think Tesla has a lot riding on the Cybertruck, and if it's not a success, it's going to hurt the company. Like the Model Y at one point had 2170 cells in it, and then they decided to put 4680 cells in it. But, if it turns out that they can't put 4680 cells in it, they can put the 2170 cells back in it. That's fine. But the Cybertruck and the structural battery pack that's supposed to be built for the Cybertruck, that's all supposed to be 4680 cells. And if they put 2170 cells in there, I think it's going to be an issue that it will end up blowing up in their face. And I don't think they want to do that. All right, let's move on to an article that was passed on to me on Twitter by Tacky Teddy. Firefighters across the country have had to revise their vehicle fire protocols as EVs hit the street. Lithium-ion battery fires are notoriously difficult to extinguish when using traditional fire hoses, and many fires take thousands of gallons of water to put out. Burning Teslas get all the attention, but all brands are susceptible. Now, that's a little... That's a little piece of the article that I cut out because I find this to be extremely annoying. And I know I hit this a lot. I know I talk about this a lot, but it is my bugaboo. Number one, we haven't revised our fire protocols. We still put water on the fire until the fire goes out. Number two, we have to fight fires differently. That's just the way it is. But it has nothing to do with the traditional fire hoses that we have. Fire hoses we use the same fire hoses on an electric vehicle as we do on an ICE vehicle. That makes no difference whatsoever. But that paragraph really isn't the story. That's just my bugaboo that pushed my button. At least 4 flooded Teslas caught fire after waters from Hurricane Ian receded in Florida. Now, the salt water damages components on the battery, and this can cause a fire. Now, I don't think that 4 is a huge number, and I don't think this is actually that big of a deal. But what I think is important is the article mentions that EVs exposed to saltwater could experience this. So any EV that is exposed to saltwater could experience this. It's not just a Tesla thing. It's just EVs in general. At some point, we as a group, like a population, the population of the world needs to just accept the fact that EVs are different than ICE cars. They're not the same. They serve the same purpose, but the positives and negatives are going to be different than what ICE cars are. One of the negatives about EVs is they're a little bit harder to put out when they catch on fire. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think we need to shift our mindset. They're not an apples to apples comparison. Really what I'm trying to get to with this is that when these kind of things happen and somebody in your life brings it up, take the time to educate them that, like, hey, this is just different. It's not the same. And a semi-truck fire is not the same as a small sedan fire for firefighters. A sedan fire is pretty easily put out, right? A semi-truck fire. This summer we had a semi-truck fire, and it was hot outside. It was like in the afternoon in Arizona in the summertime. It was hot. And we had a semi-truck where the trailer was pushed up against the building and the semi caught on fire. The tractor caught on fire. And it was our unit was sent first, and then we had to call for more units. And I think we had one ladder and 2 other engine companies helping us put this fire out, because they're not the same. It's not the same thing. Like, to give you another analogy, fighting a fire here in Arizona is actually, we use subtly different tactics than what firefighters on the East Coast do to fight fires. Like, there's just different things you're going to come up against. As a general rule, houses in Arizona are fairly new, and houses on the East Coast are older. They're built different. So we're going to fight fires differently. This is not a big deal. It's really what I'm trying to get at. All right, I'm gonna jump off my soapbox here, and we're going to talk about Teslas and cold climates. If you own a Tesla and you live in a colder climate, you might have a potential issue of the door handles freezing, especially if you own a Model Y or Model 3. Well, Tesla has added a new feature to their smartphone app, and it's called Unlatch Door. So if you live in a colder climate, let's just say Manitoba, and you go out to your car and the door locks are frozen, you just pull out your app and you hit Unlatch Door, and the door will just pop open and you're good to go. You can get in your car and go about your business. So it's a pretty cool feature. I'm actually kind of surprised it took Tesla so long to roll out that feature, but honestly, I'm glad that they did. Another thing that I'm glad that Tesla did is this week they launched a new home charger, a new home wall connector that works with other EVs. The new charger comes with a J1772 connector, and I realize that it's not technically the charger, but that's what we're going to call it to keep things simple. It'll feature a 24-foot cable, and it will give you up to 44 miles of range per hour. And it will cost a very reasonable $550. That's actually quite a good price. If you want to know more about EV charging, I actually did 2 special episodes 299 and 300. In those episodes, I just give the basics of home charging in apartments, and some commercial charging, although we didn't really get too much into that. And then episode 301, I sat down with the folks from Orange Charger, and they're trying to solve charging in multifamily units. So if you haven't listened to those episodes, I would highly suggest that they're actually full of good information. And Allison and Steve explained how electricity works in episode 300, which I'm going to tell you, they did a way better job explaining it than I would, because, Steve actually understands how electricity works, being an electrical engineer. I don't understand how it works. Like, I plug something in and it works. Moving on, earlier this summer, Elon sent an internal email to employees announcing that they're going to do a hiring pause and there's going to be some reorganization in the company. And if I'm remembering right, there was actually some layoffs. Well, we now have reports coming from Electric that Tesla is now actively hiring again. So this is great news. There was some concern about the way that the economy was going and inflation, and it sounded like Tesla was trying to scale back a little bit to see where everything landed. So it's, I think it's good that they're actively hiring again. In addition to hiring new employees, Tesla has leased a 700,000 square foot warehouse in Illinois. Now, we don't know what the purpose of this warehouse will be, but Teslarati did some sleuthing and they found job postings that make it sound like Tesla's going to use this warehouse for parts distribution, and that makes sense. In Arizona, we have a lot of warehouse space, and 700,000 square feet sounds like a lot, and it is, but it's not a lot for a warehouse, especially if you're moving parts in and out. So that it kind of makes sense that that's what they're going to do. There is also some indication that there will be a warehouse doing similar things in St. Louis. So we'll keep an eye on that. And our final story this week, electronics manufacturer Foxconn wants to build EVs for Tesla and other companies. Currently, Foxconn builds consumer electronics for companies like Apple. Like if you use a personal electronic of some kind, a consumer electronic of some kind, Foxconn probably builds it. They build a lot of them. Apple isn't the only company that they use, but they're probably one of the bigger ones. Foxconn chairman, and I'm not going to butcher their name because I simply cannot pronounce it, noted that Foxconn is looking at EV manufacturing as its new frontier and is hoping to build EVs for Tesla and other auto manufacturers in the future. Now, as far as Tesla goes, I don't think this is a very likely scenario. I don't think that Tesla would want to add the complications of a third party into the mix when they've already got their own thing set up and it's doing pretty well. Also, if Tesla used Foxconn to build their cars, there's a very good chance that would eat into some of their margins. And right now they have really good margins. Foxconn's goal is to manufacture 5% of vehicles in the EV market by 2025. To which I say you better get a move on. Currently, Foxconn is building the Lordstown Endurance because they partnered with Lordstown Motors in Lordstown, Ohio, and they've built a few of those endurance pickup trucks. I'm not sure how many, but it's not a lot. And in the not too distant future, Foxconn will build the Fisker Pear. The Fisker Pear we haven't really seen. We've seen some teaser photos, but we haven't really seen too much about it. Now, the Fisker Ocean will go into production next month. But that will be built by Magnus, and I think that's in Austria. The Fisker Pear will actually be built in Lordstown, Ohio, next to the Lordstown Endurance. Now, Foxconn has said publicly in the past that they don't want to build an EV brand of their own. They want to partner with other EV manufacturers to build their cars. Now, remember what I just said, because I'm going to completely contradict that, because Foxconn just announced an electric pickup truck and an electric crossover. Last year, I don't think I remember this, but Foxconn unveiled their first EV, the Foxtron Model C. So the company's called Foxconn, and their first EV is called the Foxtron Model C. I don't think I know that this happened, but maybe I did. Maybe we talked about it and I just forgot. Originally, I was going to read what Foxtron or Foxconn had said about the Model B, which again is the crossover, and the Model V, which was the pickup truck. But ultimately, it didn't really say anything. So to save, not to waste your time, I'm just not going to read it. The Model B will have a drag coefficient of 0.26, which is actually pretty decent. It'll have a range, according to Foxconn, I'm just going to call it Foxconn, of 450 kilometers or about 280 miles. And the EV pickup truck is going to be double cab, 5-seat configuration with sensors all over the body. All of these things that Foxconn is saying about these vehicles it's basically just words until they start mass producing this car. Like, we really don't know what the specs are going to be. It's too far out for that. I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but it will be coming here to North America and I would assume Europe and other regions as well. I'm all for more companies entering the EV space and, doing something different. I hope whatever Foxtron or Foxconn does, it's going to be affordable. I don't know what else to say here, honestly. So I'm just going to say I wish them luck. Good luck, Foxconn. All right, everybody, that is it for our show this week. If you want to email me, it's Bodie, Bodie, at 918digital.com. You can find me on Twitter at 918digital. What else? Tesla's earnings call will be on Thursday. Honestly, I have a very busy day on Thursday because I got a bunch of parent-teacher conferences I have to go to and a bunch of other stuff going on. So that episode might not be released until Friday, just so you know. But yeah, that's it. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you next week. No, not next week. I will talk to you in a few days. Honestly, I'm so dumb. I have no idea why any of you listen to this show. Take care, everybody. I'll talk to you in a couple of days.